Eagles, their OTAs begin. The Eagles making some news over the weekend. There's some NFL news out there, a lot of stuff to dive into. John McMullen at JF McMullen on Twitter. You can follow him there and listen every day at 4 o'clock for Football at 4. He, like all guests, appears via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. As we know, the summer is here. We are live at the Marquis de Lafayette Hotel. Memorial Day weekend special, $265 a night when you book Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Rooms are going fast. In fact, not only are they going fast, the gentleman said people have already been listening and calling because it's $265 a night on Memorial Day weekend, and we are across the street from the damn beach.
Couldn't be in a better location. Sign me up.
That's right.
I might do the 265.
Yeah, Johnny Mac. We are here every Monday this summer. I would have to say that we will have to see you down here for one of these live broadcasts, man. We are steps from the beach.
Yeah, I'm going to have to come down there. Krause and I did countdown to kickoff a number of times from Cape May. It's beautiful down there.
Yes, right up the street. We are right on the beach. Literally, I'm looking at the Beach Avenue sign. There are people. Look at these. This guy's got beach. I mean, people are just rolling off the beach, and we're not even at the summertime yet. So this is a personal invitation that any Monday that you'd like to come down and see us and join us. You are more than welcome to come down.
Not to get Dave Weinberg as well. He's a Cape May guy.
That's right. He's right up the street here. All right. Well, there's a lot going on. There's first off, let's start with Chris Long. He says he's retiring. He has the red Solo Cup. He goes out in perfect Chris Long fashion, and he announced on social media Saturday night that he will retire from the NFL. And we kind of, thought that obviously he wasn't going to play, but maybe if there was a team out there that they had the right role. But would you suggest that his retirement is, final, or that if halfway through the year the Eagles had an injury that he would be willing to help them out?
Well, I think from his standpoint it's final today, but I think if what you say unveils itself, I think he'll seriously consider it. I will say that. He pretty much also confirmed that he would have continued to play if he had his same role. So that to me tells me, he would have liked to have come back, certainly for another year, if he could play the same role he's had over the past 2 years, essentially. And if that opened up down the road, I think he would revisit it. He hasn't officially said that, but he's intimated to me a number of times that that's the only issue. So if that role opens up, I think he would seriously consider it. And one thing that he doesn't like to do, and he almost abhors it in the way he talks about it, he doesn't want to root for anybody to get hurt. But if that reality happens, I think he would listen.
Yeah, he retired with 70 sacks, 15 forced fumbles, 162 games, and 2 Super Bowls. He was the Walter Payton Man of the Year, and he indicated that this was his favorite stop. Playing in Philadelphia, was the best time that he had. And, of course, he played with the Patriots, won a Super Bowl there. So it was obviously something his short stay here was very impactful.
Yeah, he calls it the best sports city in America. And we all know the passion of Philadelphia fans. It's real. Every city does not have a similar setup when it comes to that. And we all know how people live and die with the Eagles in this fan base, and he really enjoyed being a part of it. I think as a whole, now that he looks back, he saw some good things. Spent a lot of time, obviously, in St. Louis. They weren't very good, but he learned a lot. And even New England, he talked about Bill Belichick and how he improved him as a player, and just how what everybody says, what kind of coach he is, and his ability to make Chris grasp. He always said he basically thought he was a very smart football player, and he was concerned about what was happening 6 inches in front of his face as a pass rusher. And Bill Belichick made him think about the entire defense, the entire scheme. So I think he enjoyed each stop, but certainly from a fan base perspective, Philadelphia was number one for him.
All right, John, OTAs and everybody talking Carson Wentz. Adam Schefter reported the Eagles have opened extension talks with Carson Wentz and likely to command about $30 million annually. But the fact of the matter is he hasn't been on the field, but no limitations is the report that he will be back for OTAs and that there shouldn't be anything holding him back. So should we see a full brigade of Carson Wentz?
Yeah, I mean, well, Howie Roseman, number one, said they had extension talks. So nobody needs to report that, number one. We all know that's going on. It has been going on. And I think it comes down, as I've said before on the show, if the Eagles can get a what can be considered, it's kind of funny to say this when you're talking about $30 million, somewhere in that range of an average annual value. But if the Eagles can get something that is, and I put this in quotes, team-friendly, it'll get done tomorrow. It'll get done that quickly. It just depends from that standpoint, and if Carson could bet on himself and make, who knows how high he could get that number. But ultimately, we all know he's going to be here. As far as him being ready for OTA, looks like he's going to be a full go, with the caveat that they'll keep an eye on him, and that's pretty much what you do with every veteran player. And that's ultimately what I expected. If he's not feeling well one day, you scale him back, maybe you sit him down, but I think it's important for him to be out there for a number of reasons, and one is the contract, because you want to prove this guy is healthy. It's been 5 months from what they first described as a 3-month injury, so he should be out there.
John, how important is the offensive line this offseason? And do you expect any changes? And to make sure your guy stays on the field once he does return is to make sure he's got the right guys in front of him. So how much of a focus is that this offseason, as it always is, but particularly with Carson's injuries?
Well, no, I don't think any of those injuries would be. He's been behind a top 5 offensive line for the past consecutive seasons, and he will be again. As far as the offseason goes, obviously there's no contact. There's nothing to worry about from that standpoint at this stage of the game. Brandon Brooks obviously will not be ready, still rehabbing from his torn Achilles suffered against the Saints in the playoffs. So you would imagine whether it's Wiz just re-signed that he'll fill in at right guard, or maybe they'll get Matt Pryor a look, a second-year player. But, I mean, those 5 guys up front, they're going to be the same. And that's good. That's as good as it gets in this league, a top 5 offensive line. You have an all-pro center, a Pro Bowl right guard, an all-pro right tackle, a future Hall of Famer at left tackle, and Isaac Seumalo is sort of the runt of the litter, but the Eagles think very, very highly of him. You look around this league, not a lot of teams that can do better than that on the offensive line.
Yeah, agree. They are fortunate in that area, but one particular spot that I'm focusing on is Jason Peters and Andre Dillard. How do you expect that to play out this year?
I expect it to play out as sort of an internship. Andre Dillard will get to learn behind one of the better left tackles, certainly of this generation. Somebody who is going to be in Canton. And Jason Peters has been one of those guys. You see the most recently with Joe Flacco sort of balking at whether you want to call it teaching or moving along a young player who ultimately is brought in to take his job. Happens a lot at the quarterback position. Jason Peters has already been doing that for years. He enjoys bringing along the younger guys, and he's done it with Vaitai, and he's sort of an extra coach. And I expect the same thing with Andre Dillard, who will be brought along slowly, and the Eagles have a luxury to do that. But we do know, while also saying that Jason has had some significant issues from an injury standpoint as his career marches on. So you would expect you're going to need Andre Dillard to play left tackle. at some points this season, and he's a first-round pick. He's got to be expected to do that.
Yeah, no doubt. We've seen a lot of Big V over the last couple of years. It's seemingly that he had at least a handful of series almost every single game. I want to go back to Wentz for a minute here because in your piece at 973ESPN.com, you wrote, if you're being logical, it's not really all that important that Wentz is ready to go for the Eagles in May, which obviously sounds like it makes sense. However, we did see last year that he got no reps at all. He had no training camp, nothing, and he did look a little rusty, and he was not the same, playmaker, kind of like improviser that we saw. So if it's not important that he's ready by May, when would the team like to see him kind of, be ready to kind of kick it into another gear?
Well,
Are we going to wait till training camp, all the way till training camp? Okay.
Yeah, but understand he's going to be ready to go tomorrow. So he's going to be on the field. He's going to be cleared, and he's going to be able to go tomorrow. So I said, when you go back to rookie camp, and I think the way Doug handled it when he got the Carson Wentz questions, and kind of pushed it off till tomorrow and said, we'll see. And that had people a little bit concerned because, as I said, when this injury first cropped up, although the timetable wasn't exactly concrete, they threw around this 3-month range. So you start to ask yourself, well, we're 5 months out. What the heck is the holdup? And the answer ultimately is there is no holdup, but for whatever reason, the Eagles were very tight-lipped about it. I don't know why. That was the reason they do some of the things they do as far as giving us injury updates. But they did announce, when they announced the schedule, and I pointed this out, Doug Peterson obviously scheduled to talk before practice. Carson Wentz was scheduled to talk after practice. And that was a sign to me that he's going to go. Because if he wasn't going to go, they wouldn't let him talk to the media. So it is May. It's not that important. Anybody who's got any injury, guys like Brooks I just mentioned, Fletcher Cox, Ronald Darby coming back from an ACL, Rodney McLeod coming back from an ACL, even Jalen Mills, they're not going to be involved because a lot of them aren't ready. But any veteran that isn't 100% shouldn't be out there in OTAs.
Yeah, it just obviously because the mystery, I guess, around his back. I mean the whole situation where he what happened last year. He wasn't going to be put on the injured reserve.
Yeah.
There were some thoughts that maybe by the playoffs, if they made it further, but obviously that was not true because he's still not ready to be full-fledged playing right now.
Yeah, well, I don't think it was true at any point that there was a possibility he could come back. I think early when the injury was first developing, we talked about it at the time. You have that transverse process. Normally, when you hear somebody in football has a broken back, it's that transverse process, which sounds horrible, broken back, but guys have been back in a week or two because it's just sort of a pain tolerance issue, and you can't hurt it any further, and that's why players are able to come back. Cam Newton, number of quarterbacks have had that type of injury. Turned out that wasn't Carson's injury. It was a stress fracture. It was a different type of thing. It did take ultimately 3 months. He has been out there in phase 2, throwing the football, doing conditioning. So I can't tell you why Doug Peterson didn't say he was going to be on the field for on-field OTAs during rookie minicamp. I think he created problems that didn't need to be there because he is going to be out there. So I don't know why the Eagles handle it that way.
John McMullen at JF McMullen, and they start tomorrow. And you'll get a chance to see how much Carson does, and obviously everything behind him, which, a lot of people, I think, look, the backup quarterback job in this town has been highly thought of ever since the backup quarterback won the Super Bowl for them. So this will be something that I think, anyway, people should be keeping an eye on, right? I mean, and one of the things that You got Sudfeld, who has not had a whole heck of a lot of experience, but they, seemingly like him enough to keep him around the last couple of years. And then you got a rookie, and then they brought a Kessler in here. So that will be something that I think will be very intriguing to keep an eye on through these OTAs.
Yeah, and I think people need to temper their expectations. It was sort of a luxury that the Eagles had, and they had a backup who had a tremendous amount of experience even before his run to the Super Bowl. It's very difficult to have that type of situation. Ultimately, the Eagles had two of the best, certainly 32 quarterbacks in the NFL. Which means essentially they had two starters, and they no longer have that. So now it's just about who's going to be the better option to be the backup. You mentioned Nate Sudfeld. He's only got 25 career attempts. And Cody Kessler, although people aren't excited, remember, everybody, Wentz, Kessler, Sudfeld, came out of that same 2016 draft. Kessler was a third-round pick. Sudfeld was a sixth-round pick. So at one point, he was a much higher regarded prospect than Nate Sudfeld, and he's got 12 NFL starts versus 25 career throws for Sudfeld. So I do think that's going to be one of the more interesting camp battles, and you got to choose just basically who's the best guy. But you also have to realize they're not going to be Nick Foles.
Is this the summer?
Nobody will ever be Nick Foles,
No,
John.
Yeah, come on now. It's immortal.
Well,
He's very
backup,
dreamy.
Yeah, as a backup. That's as good as you get.
I feel like so weird. It's seemingly so weird seeing him in Jacksonville. Like the stadium doesn't even have like a second level on it. Like it's just like it seems so small time.
I wonder if he's like thinking in his head, like I'm just going to cash out and just like I'm already. No, I'm kidding. John, do you remember
that was one of the things that I kind of told people. I don't know why people think this way, but they assume that Nick was happy being a backup and he would take less money. Look, you don't get to this level in professional sports without being competitive. And Nick Foles always wanted to be a starting quarterback, wanted to be a starting quarterback last year. But he did find the best situation. Obviously won a Super Bowl, was able to play closer again last season, get the team in the playoffs again. And he got an opportunity, and you're not turning down $20+ million to be a starting quarterback in the NFL. It doesn't mean he doesn't love Philadelphia or the Eagles, but it's a business, and you have to be realistic about it.
No, absolutely. And I don't know if you remember last year we deemed the summer of Sudfeld. So does that continue on to this summer now as well with only 25 snaps in the league, Wentz's injury, still recouping?
Well, part of that
More
was
of the same?
Part of that was, if the Eagles deemed that Sudfeld was, capable
of
that they
taking
could have
over.
traded Foles. And
Right.
I think, John, you and I both agreed that they probably should have traded Foles when they had the opportunity to. But I thought a lot of that had to do with how much they trusted Sudfeld.
Well, I think more of it has to do with how much do you believe in that safety net. And the Eagles felt that they could afford to go with it for one more year. And that's why they held off on trading. They certainly could have gotten a second-round pick, could have gotten essentially more than what they're going to get. So you have to weigh it. Was it worth that run to the playoffs? Probably. I would say that they turned out to be right because they needed Nick Foles again. But I talk about it all the time. You can't worry about injuries. You can't legislate injuries, and you can't do that because there's nothing you can do about it. It's not under your control. So you just have to build the best team possible. And they kicked the can, I say it all the time, down the road as far as they could with Nick. And ultimately, the trade-off of doing that was getting a little less in return. And now they have to move on with another backup quarterback, and it's going to be different. It's going to be more of a concern. So it's even more important that Carson Wentz stays healthy because you're not going to have the same type of backup, whether it is Nate or Cody Kessler.
Hey, John, before we roll out, do you expect with Long being out of the mix that the Eagles would still look to that spot, or are they okay with what they have? Barnett, Graham, Curry, Sweat, you mentioned Osman a lot. I mean, are they all right in that spot in their mind?
Well, I would, and I say this to people all the time, the reason, Chris, remember the Eagles already had a good veteran option at the position and decided to go in a different direction for two reasons. Playing time for Derek Barnett and playing time for Malik Jackson. So that's the plan, and that's why Chris is no longer here. You're not going to bring in a veteran player. You already had a veteran player who you've sort of opened the door to retirement because you wanted to go in a different direction of playing time with, as I said, Barnett and Jackson. That was the more important part. So, no, I don't expect them to bring in another veteran body. If they do later, that says a couple things. It says they're not confident in Derek Barnett, which I can't imagine that would happen. They're not confident in Malik Jackson, which I can't imagine that would happen. Or they're not confident in Vinny Curry as the third defensive end. That maybe, but I doubt it. And if it does happen, it would probably be in August, not right now.
All right, football at 4. We do it every day, 4 o'clock right here, Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. And OTA's open tomorrow, so we will have plenty of football to talk all week long right here with John McMullen. Follow him on Twitter at JFMcMullen. And, of course, you can read him on our website, 973ESPN.com. John, we look forward to having you live on set here one of these Mondays.
All right, enjoy the beach. I will be there. I guarantee it.
Steps from the beach is where we are. Beach Avenue, the Marquis de Lafayette Hotel. This is the Barefoot Beach Bar, appropriately named because we are across the street from the beach.